Hey everyone, welcome back to the Michael Lofton Show on Reason and Theology. I want to review a video that was put out just now from Bishop Strickland on LifeSite News' channel, where they attempt to engage a point that I brought up maybe a few weeks ago at this point. They attempted to engage it, but did so insufficiently, and I need to point out why and show why they're still wrong in this particular matter. And so that's what we're up against today. Now, I do want to remind everyone who is critical of Bishop Strickland to be charitable. I don't want to see anything in the comment section crossing the line. Be charitable and respectful. He still is a bishop. Of course, we know his situation, right? But he's still a bishop. He still deserves respect, even if at the very least for the sake of the indelible mark that he has. So please, again, keep it respectful. You can be critical, that's fine, but be constructive in your criticism, and again, respectful in tone and nature. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin here. I'm going to go to the 12-minute 58-second mark, where they attempt to engage something I brought up a few weeks ago, but did so insufficiently, and I want to show why. All right, so let's go ahead and begin here. Let's see. All right, let's start now. Oh, and by the way, I do want to remind y'all before we dive in, go ahead and hit that subscribe button now so that more people can see this video response. So do that, and also hit the like button. All right, let's go ahead and begin again around the 12-minute 58-second mark for the video. Bishop Strickland calls out Rome for weaponized ambiguity on women, homosexual blessings.
Big confusion from Rome. In fact, it was discovered by Dan Montagna, a reporter, Vatican reporter, who's very much into languages, particularly Italian. She's just perfect in Italian. When she looked at the texts, she discovered, lo and behold, in the Italian, the official text, paragraph 38 of Fiducia Supplicans, because in the beginning it does talk very specifically about the possibility of blessing for irregular couples and same-sex couples. So we're talking about couples already, and that created much consternation, particularly in Africa. But she discovered something even beyond that, because in America, particularly, there were people arguing about, no, it's for individuals, but it says couples. But yes, but the text says individuals. And then came something of a bombshell when she reports that, wait a minute, actually in the Italian original, it doesn't say for individuals. It talks about for them. In the German, für sie, which is totally plural, it's not. And in Spanish, para ellos, and in other languages, there's about 5 languages there. Even in Dutch, we check, it's not Dutch, excuse me, Polish, it also is the plural only. So somehow there's some fooling around going on, making in English I don't know, it's some kind of leaning toward perhaps a more orthodox interpretation, because, well, that's where all the pushback comes from, usually in English-speaking countries, and now it's English-speaking Africa and America as well. What's your take on that? It was just...
All right, before we hear Bishop Strickland's take on it, I want to show you what he's referring to. Now, this is the definition of what's called sophistry, which is odd because it's usually the critics who take this position who say that I and others who defend the magisterium engage in sophistry. But this is actually the definition of sophistry. Here is a distinction without a difference, and I'm going to show it to you. But to recap, the concern that a lot of people have had is that the blessings in question is for a relationship, for a disordered relationship. And I've often pointed out in the document over and over and over, the object of the blessing is not for the relationship or the union. The document is very explicit about that. It is for the persons who are in this disordered relationship. So for the couple, a couple is 2 individuals in a relationship. The object of the blessing is for the 2 individuals, not for their relationship. And I even pointed out in paragraph 38, I was the first one to bring this up. Hey, in paragraph 38, it even notes in the English that the object of the blessing is for individuals. And what they're trying to do is say, well, but that's the English. In these other languages, it says for them. I'm going to show you why this is a distinction without a difference. Let me let me share my screen, and you can follow along with the document. The problem for them still remains, because for them is the same as individuals. Because let me ask you a question. If we are talking about a blessing for two people in a relationship, and the blessing is for the two people, for them, what is that? That's for two individuals, right? Therefore, you can say it's for them, and you can also say it's for individuals. It's a both and, not either or. They're not mutually exclusive. But somehow they're engaging in this sophistry to where they think this somehow means that there's a difference between for them, a blessing for them, versus a blessing for individuals. It's the same thing. Who do you think them is? Is them a relationship? Does the pronoun them describe a relationship? Honest question, grammatically, in whatever language. Of course not. It refers to persons. When you speak of them, you're talking about persons, not a relationship. So this was a distinction without a difference, and my original point remains. Let me show it to you on the screen. Paragraph 38. For this reason, one should neither provide for nor promote a ritual for the blessing of couples in an irregular situation. Now, notice we're talking about blessings for couples. Now, how is couples understood? Is it for their relationship, or is it for the two people who make up this couple? Well, it will tell you. Watch what it says. At the same time, one should not prevent or prohibit the church's closeness to people in every situation in which they might seek God's help through a simple blessing. Notice it's for people. In a brief prayer preceding the spontaneous blessing, the ordained minister could ask that the individuals have peace, health, and a spirit of patience, dialogue, and mutual assistance, but also that God's light and strength be able to fulfill his will completely, to be able to fulfill his will completely. So my argument is, couples here is the blessing of couples is understood according to this paragraph as a blessing for persons. You can even see that here where it says people, and here where it says individuals. Now, they tried to get around this as if it's saying it's a blessing for the relationship. They tried to get around this, as you just heard, by saying, but wait, in these other languages, it says for them, not for individuals. So you come down here to the Spanish, and it uses a Spanish term that indicates for them, para ellos, right? And then in Italian, it uses, I think it's costoro, if I recall correctly, which is found right here, costoro. Now, costoro could mean these, them. It could mean each of them, by the way. Each of them. It could mean that. But it doesn't really matter. But they're trying to argue here, well, you see here it's referring to plural for them, but in the English, it's for individuals. That's the argument. Now, again, this is a distinction without a difference. The individuals translation is a dynamic equivalency of what they're saying in these other languages. It's no different. Because again, if the blessing is for them, who's the them? The couple. What's a couple? Two individuals in a relationship. Well, it's not a blessing for their union or their relationship, as the document is explicit. What's left? The two individuals, which is why it says in the context the blessing is for people, and again translated into English as individuals. So either way, it doesn't matter. You can translate it for them. Who's them? It's not a relationship. A them is not a relationship. Okay. If a them was a relationship, every time you have, as I've belabored to say in multiple videos, every time you have a divorce, the people would cease to exist. They would disappear off planet Earth. There's obviously a difference between the them and the relationship, right? So for them, blessing for them is a blessing for two individuals. It's the same thing. But now they're trying to say that somehow this gets them out of the predicament. No, it doesn't, because the object of the blessing is still for them, for individuals, not for their union. So you still have the difficulty of the angle that you've been taking with the document. And then number two, are we seriously to believe that there was this plot in the Vatican? Let me go and change the English version and make it more orthodox. Make it more orthodox. But then over here in the Spanish and Italian, it's going to be more liberal. This is what you have to resort to when you dissent against the church. Desperate takes like this. So somebody in the Vatican plotted, made it more orthodox in English. Okay. Really? Again, them is two individuals. So it's harmonious. It means the same thing. You don't have to resort to this grand conspiracy, conspiracy theory that they're trying to make it more orthodox for the English speaking world. You don't have to resort to these kinds of desperate tactics. What kind of sophistry is this? Just say, hey guys, we were wrong. Sorry. Just admit it. Now, I don't honestly think that LifeSite News or even Bishop Strickland are going to admit it at this point. I don't believe so. I don't really have any hope that they're going to at this point. It'd be great if they do, but I don't really have any hope. I do this video not to convince them because I don't believe they will be convinced. I do this video for the people who are caught in the middle of all this stuff and don't know what to think. I do this video for you, for those of you who still have an open mind. Do you see how desperate they've become? Do you see how absurd this is? That should tell you something. Now, let's continue. I want to get Bishop Strickland's thoughts on it. Let's hear what he has to say. Oh, and by the way, I did find this kind of comical. Poor guy. This guy asked, I deleted his name because I didn't want him to, I didn't want his name to be in there because it's not about who said this. But look at what they asked whenever Diane posted that distinction without a difference and thought that somehow there's this big conspiracy theory to change the English, when again the English translation, the dynamic equivalency there is again dynamically the same as what you have in the other languages. But watch what this person does. God bless them. He says, sincerely, what is the difference between ask for them peace and help and ask that the individuals have peace and help? This is an honest question. God bless him. He's trying. He's trying to understand these critics. He's like, guys, what really is the difference between a blessing for them and blessing of the individuals? Because the them is two individuals. So it seems to be the same thing. Yeah, you got it. You were right. You were right. The guy who asked the question, and it's a sincere question, God bless you. You got it. You understood. There is no difference. That's the point. They're trying to sell you a bill of goods telling you there's a difference when there's no difference. It means the same thing. A them is individuals, two individuals, the people who are in this relationship, the two people. It is not a relationship, because you can't describe a relationship as a them. You can't describe a union as a them. You can, however, describe two individuals as a them. Right? God bless the guy. He got it. He understood it. He was picking up on it. And yeah, okay. Well, let's see what Bishop Strickland has to say.
Stunning to me.
Well, once again, confusion. And one thing that I would point out that is, I think, problematic, certainly could be dealt with, but for many, many years, I would presume centuries, I don't claim to know that for sure, but I know when I studied canon law, what we learned is the official texts were always published in Latin. Um, and I can see now why that's so important because, as you know,
Look, I'm sympathetic to what Bishop Strickland is saying here before we continue. I'm very sympathetic to this because even though there is no difference on this particular point between a blessing for individuals and a blessing for them, it's the exact same thing. It's just two ways of expressing the same thing. Um, Even though on this particular point there's no difference, despite their attempts to say otherwise, it is helpful when you do have one particular document that is the standard, and it's helpful if it's in a language like Latin or Greek or something that's precise. So I'm very actually sympathetic to what Bishop Strickland is saying, and I kind of feel like we do need to get back to this. Um, and the Vatican still does on occasion publish things in Latin, but the point is, lately it has kind of been doing these just different languages with no official language text, and or I do think that's unfortunate. I think I understand why they're doing that. They're doing it because if you have to wait for the Latin text to come out as the standard before you have anything, responding to issues would take a lot longer. So it seems to me they're more concerned about get something out as quickly as possible. That has some advantages because you're able to respond to something quicker. It also has disadvantages because you don't have like a standard language here. You don't have a document that this language is the standard, and now we're going to translate from this. So it has some pros, it has some cons, and so I'm sympathetic to what Bishop Strickland is saying here, but I kind of understand why the Vatican has lately, in some cases, moved away from this. In this particular case, I think it would be helpful to have a Latin text of Fiducia Supplicans, and there still isn't one yet. We should already have that by now. So I do think here's some good constructive criticism that the Vatican could take from Bishop Strickland, and I'll add my voice to it for whatever that's worth, and say, yeah, maybe we do need to get back to having a standard official Latin text. That is helpful whenever we are trying to appeal to something very precise in terminology. It's not necessary in this particular case because it's so abundantly clear what is the object of the blessing. It doesn't hinge on one paragraph or one sentence or even one word. There are dozens of paragraphs that explain to you what the object of the blessing is. So there's no one place or one word that this really hinges on. So this is kind of folly for them to even bring this up. But in other situations, there are instances theologically where something might hinge on one particular word or phrase, and so we do need to have that standard. Okay, so let's get back to the video here.
Translations can, as you're pointing out, can make a total difference in the meaning and can be critical to what we're talking about. And so the wisdom of the church using Latin as the standard, as the home base language to be used always, it really helps to avoid the confusion.
It does help avoid some confusion, but I will point this out. Critics like Bishop Strickland and critics like John Henry Weston and others, even if there were a Latin text, that would not be sufficient. They would still criticize this document. And I think that they would still claim that there's ambiguity here and there. So I'm sympathetic to what Bishop Strickland is saying to an extent, because at the end of the day, you know what, this isn't an issue of, well, we just lack a standard text in Latin or something. No, that's not really the heart of the issue here. The heart of the issue is your approach. You use the hermeneutic of suspicion. That's the problem. And even with a Latin text, you can approach a Latin text with the hermeneutic of suspicion and come up with all sorts of criticisms on that basis. So the deeper problem is not the fact that we don't have a Latin text. The deeper problem is their approach, the hermeneutic of suspicion, which I'm going to show you how that works here in a moment with Bishop Strickland. I'm going to show you the hermeneutic of suspicion versus the hermeneutic of continuity and charity. And I'm going to use it on Bishop Strickland's own words here in just a moment. I'm going to show you how this plays out in reality. And hopefully, if he watches this, he'll become more sensitive to it when he sees how things could go either way, depending on the hermeneutic we use with Bishop Strickland. All right, let's continue.
And you can, I mean, like the Code of Canon Law, you have a Latin text. And I mean, you can have different ideas about certain translations of Latin, but some, like you're pointing out, some of it's totally clear. I mean, in Spanish, I know some Spanish, ellos means them.
Right. But them is two individuals in a disordered union. And the blessing is for the two individuals in the disordered union, not the disordered union itself. This is just very, very basic. So the distinction is irrelevant because it's a distinction without a difference. This is sophistry. This is playing word games because the meaning is still the same. The blessing is for them. What's a them? It's persons, it's individuals. A them is not a relationship. A them is not a union. A them is two persons, two or more. And in this context, it's two. So why are we having this kind of difficulty? I know why. Well, because we're approaching things with this hermeneutic of suspicion. And at this point, it seems like we are closed to being corrected. We're closed to reevaluating things. And watch, it gets more interesting here.
Doesn't mean anything else. If you're using that word, you're speaking of a plural, them. And so that's one level of problem that I see with issuing a text in Italian. Why not issue it in Latin? Mm-hmm. And then be very clear about the translations of those Latin words into the different languages. Beyond that, it doesn't help. I mean, I applaud you and Diane and other journalists who are watching things. And
they weren't watching things. I was the one who pointed out to them that it says individuals, and that triggered them to go and look into this. They weren't being that vigilant.
I mean, that's what you need to do, is to point out, was it a mistake? It needs to be corrected. Was it intentional? With what sort of intent was there?
It means the same thing, so it can't be a mistake. It means the same thing. It's just a dynamic translation, a dynamic versus formal. It's the same thing. For them is the same as for the individuals. So there's no mistake and there's no grand conspiracy theory here. But he's going to say this opens up the door to think that there is this grand conspiracy theory. It's just absurd.
To me, without even trying to figure out why this was done, if it was done intentionally, if it was not an editing error, which I presume it wasn't, or that would have been made very clear already. Oh, we edited it wrong.
It's not an editing error. It has the same meaning.
Here's the proper correction. And that can happen. I mean, we both edited text. I mean, you can have a mistake there. But it's very troublesome. And to me, probably the heart of what troubles me about it is that, again, it gives fodder to people who love to attack the church.
All right. Now, let me engage this. So Bishop Strickland is concerned that this somehow, the English translation, somehow is not the same as these other languages. So unless they come out and clarify why there's an error here, which again, it's not, but for some reason they assume that this can't mean the same thing. And okay, it's either an error or there's this big grand conspiracy theory to deceive. And then it gives license for critics who want to tear down the church. Irony here, who want to tear down the church by saying, see, the Vatican is being deceitful. That's the argument. Okay. Well, let me approach Bishop Strickland with this type of criticism. Let's see if this works for him. Let's see if he survives the standard that he's now holding the Vatican to. Okay. Now, there's two ways to approach something. You can approach something by trying to harmonize something or to try to show that they are dichotomous and can't be reconciled, right? Two ways to approach something. Often Bishop Strickland engages in this hermeneutic of rupture, where he's trying to show that, look, these just can't be harmonized. And his concern is, well, this is now open for exploitation. Weaponized ambiguity is the name of the document, right? Keep that in mind. The name of the video, I should say. Let's see if Bishop Strickland himself survives this same test and standard that he applies to the Vatican. This is just one example among many that I can offer. I provided a short not long ago. I want you to watch this short with me. Let's consider the question. Did the Vatican tell Bishop Strickland why he was removed? Okay, that's the question. Watch.
Why were you fired? Do you know yet?
Well, I think I know.
January 6, 2024.
But you haven't been told.
Officially, no.
Okay.
No, nothing official, but because I've spoken out and said the truth doesn't change, and there's really an agenda clearly from the Vatican.
Did Cardinal
Now, November 16, 2023, well before that interview we just saw. Watch this.
Pierre offer any reason for the request for you to retire? Or
Yes,
resign
he
your office, rather?
read several pages of issues of concerns.
Or
Yes,
resign
he
your office, rather?
read several pages of issues of concerns.
What?
All right. So now, having watched this, there's two ways to approach Bishop Strickland on the matter. Number one, you can just assume he's lying. That is an option. You can assume that he's intending to deceive. Now, remember, that is often how he approaches the Vatican. So if we are going to take that same approach and hold his feet to the fire and hold him to that very standard that he holds the Vatican to, we could just say he's intending to deceive everybody. He's intending to deceive the audience. He's lying, blah, blah, blah. And some people have come to that conclusion. I haven't yet come to that conclusion. And I don't recommend that you do. I recommend that you give him the judgment of charity here. And I'll tell you why. Because it is possible that Bishop Strickland honestly and sincerely, though absurdly, but sincerely believes, however absurd, that there is a distinction between the unofficial meeting with the nuncio where he gave a whole bunch of lists of concerns with Bishop Strickland versus an official list of reasons why he was removed. Now, this would be, again, a distinction without a difference here, because the ultimate question is, do you know why you were removed? Not, did you receive something official or not? The question more was, do you know why you were removed? And the answer to that would be, yes, I was sat down the day before I was removed and told by Christophe Pierre, the nuncio, a whole long list of reasons why I was removed. Now, he focuses on, well, I wasn't given an official thing. Well, again, a distinction without a difference. That's irrelevant. Doesn't really matter. And by the way, if you're called into the principal's office and the nuncio sits you down and gives you a whole bunch of reasons for why you're going to be removed tomorrow, just a hint, that's the official reason. Okay. That's an official meeting with the nuncio. Okay. That's not unofficial. What do you think a meeting with the nuncio is the day before you're removed, where he reads to you a long list of why you're going to be removed the next day? What do you think that is? So again, I can approach him the way he approaches the Vatican and say, he's a deceiver. He's intentionally misleading people. Or I could say, no, he sincerely believes there's somehow a distinction between an official list versus what happened with Christophe Pierre. Now, it's an absurd thing to think that there's really a distinction here, but I'm going to give him the judgment of charity and assume that that's what it is. But you see how he seems to be, and there's a very long pattern at this point of Bishop Strickland seems to really struggle with understanding and processing things and events. I mean, he seems to somehow really struggle with processing how this all went down and why he was removed. And to the point that he can make these claims like, I wasn't given an official list or anything like that, and think that that somehow is relevant to the question, do you know why you were removed? It seems he has a difficulty in processing information here. Okay. So that doesn't automatically translate into he's dishonest. It could just translate into he has a difficulty with processing information accurately. So I hold out that it's not he is intentionally trying to deceive. But since there is this pattern of him constantly misunderstanding things and having a really hard time trying to harmonize and reconcile things, that explains why he continues to have a difficult time analyzing the Vatican and what it says. He's had this for a while. But again, the whole point to show you, to recap going before we go back to Bishop Strickland was, well, if we hold him to the same standard that he's speaking of here, that Rome should be held to, then you know what? We would have to conclude he's a liar and deceiver, and that he is giving license to the enemies of the church to exploit the church. Again, I think that would be unfair to Bishop Strickland if we concluded that. But it's also unfair to conclude that the Vatican is trying to deceive, especially when it's ridiculous to think that there is somehow really a difference here between the languages on this particular point, since the meaning is clearly the same. All right, let me get back to the video.
It gives people, information that says there's deceit here. You hate to make that judgment, but having a brain, you can say, well, that is one path you can go down.
All right. And in all fairness, it is one path to go down to say that Bishop Strickland is a deceiver and liar. That is a path to go down. It is not a charitable one, and it is not the one that I opt for. But by this same standard, that is a path.
And that's a very difficult and problematic path to say there's an intentional deceit happening with one in translation in English and another in another language. That what's going on there? And that becomes, we have such a problem in the world today.
And by the way, it's clear which path they have chosen. I mean, look at the title, right? Weaponized Ambiguity, and the whole tone of this video. It's clear that they do think that there was an intention to deceive. They're not giving the judgment of charity. So again, if we hold him to the standard that he now holds the Vatican to, and he doesn't give the judgment of charity to the Vatican, then people shouldn't give him the judgment of charity, and they should just assume he's a liar. Again, I think that's wrong. And I correct people whenever they try to come into the chat and say the Bishop Strickland is a liar. I correct them and say, no, not necessarily. It could be that he honestly thinks that there's no distinction between that meaning that he had with the nuncio versus an official list. Like, he honestly is just that confused and really thinks that there's a distinction here that is somehow relevant. So I just want to point out that inconsistency. And in fact, it's not just him. It's all these guys, all these critics who approach the Vatican with this hermeneutic of suspicion. I can do that to them. I can do that to them, and people often do it to them. And I sometimes have to correct those people and say, hold on, no, wait, because you're now no better than them when they do it. So, all right, let's continue and see what else he says here.
Not just in the church, but across the board with authority and trusting authority.
Ooh.
And these kind of things don't help.
Ooh. Trusting authority. He says, we have a difficulty today with trusting authority, and these kinds of things don't help. Wow. Well, again, with all due respect, Bishop Strickland, I think you need to look in the mirror. I honestly think that Bishop Strickland has a problem with trusting authority, especially magisterial authority. That is very apparently clear. I've demonstrated that thoroughly on this this channel before. There has been a pattern of distrusting magisterial authority, and the dissent that he has engaged in publicly, and the behavior in which he has engaged in, and the way he has approached magisterial authority has aggravated the situation in the church where people are struggling with trusting authority. So the very criticism that he is offering here against the Vatican is actually criticism that applies to him. He wants to say, look, people are struggling with trusting the Vatican's authority. And so when you have these language problems, it gives license to people to distrust. Wait, hold on, Bishop Strickland. You have a problem with trusting Vatican authority and the magisterium yourself. And when you engage in this kind of behavior, and then when you employ these distinctions without a difference, you then give grounds to other people to distrust the Vatican. You see how that actually applies to you. So if we're going to talk about trusting authority and the problem of distrusting authority, we need to do some self-examination here, some introspection. We need to look in the mirror, because it starts with us. We have to make sure that we are trusting the magisterium, not accusing it of heresy, and not signing petitions or signing documents that accuses it of heresy, which he still has not revoked his signature from. Again, he has signed a document that accuses Pope Francis's magisterium of teaching heresy and desiderio desideravi. He has not retracted his signature. I hope he does. It'd be nice if he does, but he hasn't done that yet. There's a problem there with his trusting of authority when he thinks that that authority teaches heresy. Okay, let's continue.
When people that are ready to just tear the church down can say, see, they're being deceptive in the way they're doing this. You would hate to even think that.
But who is the one introducing the doubt here? Who is the one making the claim that the Vatican is being deceptive? You saw him. Bishop Strickland, John Henry Weston, in that crowd. They're the ones suggesting that. So they're the ones giving license and grounds to the critics who want to distrust the magisterium. They're the ones doing that. Nobody else is doing it. It's them. So if you think that's a problem, stop doing it. Stop doing it. Join me and others who are defending the magisterium. We could certainly use your help, Bishop Strickland. You would be most welcome if you just turn away from your dissent, publicly set the record straight, change your approach. You could do so much good for the church, Bishop Strickland. But you have to turn away from this.
But it opens the door for that kind of speculation. And I think we need to pay attention to that, because in this modern world, with all the communication, with all the people that would love to, we've both heard statements from people that want to have a globally different world, who would love to see the Catholic Church totally eliminated from the human landscape. We know that won't happen, because it was established by Jesus Christ, God's divine Son. But the fact that people would love to see that happen, and these kind of things undermine the presence of the church in the world that needs to be a beacon of light and hope. So I hope we can learn from some of these things and be very clear about everything that's issued. And if it is what I would call sinister intention of being deceptive, that needs to be addressed as well. What in the world is going on if leaders in the church are intentionally saying, well, in this language, they'll get this version. In this language, they'll get a different version. And talk about politics. That's what you can presume, is they're trying to tamp down one or the other somehow, saying, well, it'll be more accepted. It's just deceit. And it's
You hear this? They're the ones putting forward the conspiracy. They're the ones doing it. And then actually trying to express concern that this will somehow undermine the church if the Vatican doesn't clarify these things because of the conspiracy. You guys are the ones making up the claim that it's a conspiracy when it's not. And it's laughable at this point, because it's based on a distinction without a difference. I think anybody who's ever watched Sesame Street right now is probably laughing, because they're just thinking, wow, you really don't understand? You really don't get it? You really want to try to suggest to me that a blessing for them is somehow different for a blessing for the two individuals? It's the same thing. Who's the them? It's two individuals. It's definitely not the union or the relationship. Therefore, it's the two individuals. Again, that this is the grounds that they're trying to stand on to make the claim that there's this potential conspiracy. This is just, I don't know. This is weird. Let me grab this from the chat. When a gay couple walks in and stands before a priest, will the priest bless them individually as they stand together holding hands in front of the priest, and the priest puts both of his hands? First of all, if they're holding hands, I mean, the document number 1 indicates there shouldn't be any gestures like that. Number 2, the document refers to people who are not trying to validate their union, who are seeking God's grace to be freed from this disordered union. So if they're holding hands and presenting themselves as holding hands, I think that that is very much what the document is saying. You cannot offer a blessing in these cases because that would cause scandal. So what you're describing is something where the priest would need to say, no, I cannot offer you a blessing until you stop trying to justify and get a legitimization of your status. So I think you just need to read the document. But honestly, Charvel, and not to put you on the spot, but I think you represent a lot of people here on this particular question. I have an honest question. I mean, do you examine yourself this scrupulously? You want to present a scenario where, these two people walk in and they do this and that, and is there somehow going to be a valid? Do you hold your own soul to that kind of scrupulous examination? Honest question. Do you examine yourself daily like that? Do you ask yourself, oh, well, have I done this? Have I done that? Do I need to confess this and that? I don't know. I mean, I think we honestly need to start being a little bit more introspective and asking those kinds of questions, because it's really easy to point at other people and say, oh, look, this is wrong, when we're not doing that to ourselves. If we're going to see fault in someone else and call it out, okay, the Bible allows for that, but it does speak about how we have to take the log out of our own eye first. And I'm not making any judgments on you in particular. I'm just speaking in general. A lot of times we have a log in our eye, and we have to be very introspective. So if we are going to be critical of others and we are going to correct those things, we need to make sure we're doing close examinations of conscience and that we confess our sins very frequently, very often. Not in an overly scrupulous way. We're going to actually have a video tomorrow about guarding against scrupulosity, but I think you understand what I'm saying. Just make sure that you're confessing your sins regularly, because it's hard to be in that position when you criticize others when you don't examine yourself in that way. So I think that we need to keep that in mind. Anyways, I hope this was helpful to y'all. If it was, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, share this with other people on social media who might be confused. I especially need you to hit that subscribe button because, like I say, the more people subscribe, the more YouTube will then share this with new people who have not heard of Reason and Theology. And a lot of the critics, they have pretty large platforms and they have a large reach, and they're reaching a lot of people with misinformation. And what I'm trying to do is dispel that misinformation and offer people the full picture, offer them something where they could see, actually, there is a reason for us to have confidence in the magisterium that Jesus Christ established. So help me reach those people by hitting that subscribe button. So if you've benefited from RNT before, but you haven't hit that subscribe button, please do your part now. Go ahead and hit that sub button. And again, the like button while you're at it. All right, well, that's effectively the video, so I'll just end it there. I hope y'all found this helpful. We'll see you later. Hey friends, do you want others to discover why the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus established? And do you want to help people make sense of all the confusion in the Catholic Church today? Help contribute to this mission by supporting Reason and Theology at patreon.com/Reason and Theology. By doing so, you'll also get access to exclusive content for patrons only. Also, if you want to deepen your faith, there are free ebooks and even courses that you can sign up for by visiting reason.podia.com.